same kind of extortion that we heard when Cassie took the stand and testified on that airplane ride back from France. Diddy said, "You don't do a freak off, I'm going to release one of the freak off videos that you are profiled in and humiliate."
The haters bring you down. Just keep going, keep chasing your passions and dreams no matter what. Do not let negative people get between you.
Sean Combs' most damaging moment didn't come from a judge or a sentence. It came when his own daughters rushed out of the courtroom, visibly shaken, struggling to hold it together as people reacted like something major had just landed. The trial was supposed to be about accountability, maybe even closure, until everything shifted the second they couldn't stay in their seats. Sources inside the courtroom say the reaction wasn't about hearing allegations for the first time. It was recognition. Familiar voices, specific details and patterns that lined up with stories that have circulated for years. Stories the jury still dismissed on the most serious charges. Prosecutors played testimony while Combs sat motionless as a male companion described being pressured to continue an encounter in a warehouse surrounded by celebrity clothing and personal items. The details were disturbing and the numbers raised serious questions. Hundreds of bottles of baby oil seized, over 100 lawsuits pending, and a $20 million settlement paid within a single day. Still, the jury labeled the situation toxic but consensual. Yet, his own children couldn't sit through the verdict. That reaction spoke louder than any ruling because the real punishment isn't a sentence length. It's watching trust collapse in real time. This is the same man who built a luxury-filled image around his family, while facing allegations that paint a very different picture. Reports say hotel staff were paid to make damaging footage disappear. And that's only what has already surfaced publicly. And the recordings people keep whispering about, the ones no major platform has fully released, are still out there.
Day 17 on the Diddy trial as the biggest one yet. Guess what? Bingo, you won, because today was probably the most eventful day as far as things that happened that were said on the stand, and most importantly, things that the judge said, because Diddy almost got kicked out of his own.
The moment Jesse Combs and Delilah Combs stood up in that Manhattan courtroom and walked out mid-testimony, the case stopped being only about Sean Combs and became about the cracks forming in his final layer of protection, his family. This wasn't a dramatic move for attention, according to people inside the courtroom who witnessed it firsthand. Sources say the twins didn't just step out. They rushed away, hands over their mouths, eyes wide, shaken in a way that looked raw and unplanned. The timing mattered. It happened during Daniel Phillips's testimony. The male companion, who described how Combs allegedly arranged what he referred to as freak-offs, extended situations where women were reportedly pressured into intimate acts with hired partners while Combs watched, directed, and sometimes recorded. What made the moment stand out is that the girls had already sat through weeks of graphic testimony without reacting. But this was where composure broke, and that's where the defense narrative starts to feel unstable. If everything was simply toxic but consensual, as argued, why did his own daughters respond like they had just seen something deeply disturbing? Even more confusing, after hearing all of this, the jury still cleared him of the racketeering charges, the ones that could have meant life behind bars.
The court reaches few conclusions. 135 months would be more than necessary. A sentence over 11 years is not reasonable. Even the probation department recommends a sentence less than half of that, but 14 months time served would not be sufficient. A judge
That disconnect left many observers stunned. The verdict delivered in July 2025 reflected a split decision. After 8 weeks of testimony, the jury convicted Combs on 2 counts related to transporting individuals across state lines for private arrangements, each carrying potential prison time, while rejecting the broader racketeering, conspiracy, and trafficking claims. Prosecutors argued Combs operated a structured network using staff and resources to enable these events. The jury, however, decided the evidence didn't meet the legal threshold for an organized criminal enterprise. According to legal analysts, the jury struggled with one key issue: whether Sean Combs knowingly ran an operation with staff who understood what was happening. In plain terms, the jury appeared to believe the women, including Cassie Ventura's decade-long account of abuse, the companion's descriptions of coercion, and hotel employees who testified about being paid to make surveillance footage disappear. But they stopped short of calling it organized crime. That's where the story starts to twist. Because if this wasn't coordinated, How do you explain investigators finding hundreds of bottles of baby oil and nearly 1,000 containers of intimate lubricants across multiple properties? Or the allegation that a hotel security guard was paid 6 figures to erase footage showing Combs striking Cassie in a hallway? Court records also describe these events as following a rigid pattern, so specific that multiple participants called it routine. Then came sentencing. 50 months the maximum allowed for the convictions, but far less than what prosecutors pushed for. Around Subramanian called it a significant sentence meant to serve as a deterrent. But many observers saw it differently. This wasn't really about deterrence. It was about the last legal lever available against someone who spent decades moving above consequences. In his letter to the court, Combs wrote, "I lost my way. My downfall was rooted in my selfishness." Language that sounded more rehearsed than reflective. Meanwhile, Cassie Venter's statement to the court landed heavy. She said she feared swift retaliation if he ever walked free. Not just toward her but toward others who spoke out. That fear didn't come out of nowhere. In 2023, Combs settled her lawsuit for $20 million in under 24 hours. A move many saw as an attempt to end the noise, not make things right. Now that the verdict is in, the question isn't whether Sean Combs might seek retaliation. It's who's still around to protect the people who could be in his path.
I'm happy to go. So we think that's just absolutely inconsistent with the jury's verdict. I mean, the jury's verdict was resoundingly clear. There was no trafficking, there was no racketeering, everything was consensual, everything was adult, which is why he was convicted only of the offense. What we feel happened today was that the judge acted as a 13th juror, yes, one that we did not choose, and that he second-guessed.
The legal process ended, but the fallout didn't. The real damage didn't come from the courtroom decision, and it came from what followed, or more accurately, what stopped happening. His empire was once seen as untouchable. Bad boy records, beverage partnerships, endorsement deals, and a carefully polished image of a self-made mogul who escaped his past. But the moment his twins walked out of that courtroom, the illusion started collapsing in real time. Employees connected through TriStar Sports and Entertainment reportedly saw paychecks delayed or not arrive at all. Lawyers handling his growing stack of civil cases went unpaid. One staffer allegedly quit outright after the family tried to organize a dinner the night before sentencing, only to be told funds had to be formally invoiced like any outside vendor. This is a man who once moved millions with a single phone call. And now even his inner circle treats him like a financial risk. The mansion in Hamebe Hills, complete with a grotto-style pool and private studio, was searched by federal agents in March 2024, with reports noting substances, weapon components, and massive quantities of intimate products. That property sat listed for over a year at $61.5 million before quietly being pulled from the market in December. No one wants to buy a house tied to the kind of private arrangements that led to convictions, especially when the neighbors include Jennifer Lopez and Kylie Jenner. The silence around that mansion now speaks louder than anything said in court, because there's still a part of this story no one wants to touch. The basement keeps coming up. The one federal agents didn't fully explore. Investigators documented what they could see: substances, weapon parts, and large quantities of intimate products. But former staffers have long whispered about a lower level with soundproof rooms that was never completely searched. Now that the property is off the market, the question isn't just what might be down there. It's who's making sure it stays buried. Because if something was missed the first time, someone has a strong incentive to keep it from ever surfacing. And whoever is handling that kind of cleanup doesn't do it out of loyalty alone.
About the documentary, man, it was just old news, and they took a couple of with the footage from Puff from the days that's leading up him to get arrested, and the incidents with the people from the courts, the 2 people from the courts. So it was nothing new.
Then came the Netflix documentary Sean Combs: The Reckoning, which dropped in December and hit like a cultural shockwave. Executive produced by 50 Cent, a longtime rival, the series claims to use legally obtained footage from the days leading up to Combs' arrest, including a clip where he's heard telling his attorney, "We have to find somebody who will work with us." The documentary goes far beyond a recap of the trial. It presents allegations linking Combs to the deaths of Tupac Shakur, and the notorious B.I., leaning heavily on interviews, leaked files, and long-circulating claims. One of the most explosive moments centers on Dwayne Keith Davis, who has said in a 2009 police interview that Combs allegedly offered money related to Shocker's killing. Combs has consistently denied this claim, but the documentary highlights the timing and unresolved questions. All of this drops while Combs is incarcerated, his daughters face online harassment, and his sons reportedly rush to produce a defensive series for Zeus Network. This isn't just a legal fight anymore. It's a public Tyrone happening in real time. And that's where the bigger question starts for me. Because if the jury rejected racketeering, what happens when the court of public opinion keeps digging anyway? Why are so many people who never met Sean Combs suddenly acting like they knew him personally? The inmates cheering at Fort Dix weren't just reacting to a fallen celebrity. They were responding to a familiar story, one they recognized from inside the system. To them, it wasn't about fame. It was about someone they believed played by a certain code. Online, the reaction feels just as calculated. The flood of memes targeting the Combs twins' social media isn't random noise. It's a signal, a message that says, your father's choices now follow your name, whether you ask for that weight or not. At the same time, Combs' own legal team reportedly struggling to get paid isn't just a money issue. It sounds like an empire realizing the vault is empty. This isn't a collapse happening in courtrooms anymore. It's happening quietly behind the scenes. Look at the small signs, deleted Instagram comments, calls from former allies that never get returned. A documentary trailer from his sons that feels less like a defense and more like a farewell. The most revealing moment though came from the place Combs likely believed was still secure. His family. Christian Combs and Justin Combs announced their own docuseries in December. Set to release in 2026, the preview shows them watching trial footage in silence before taking a collect call from their father in prison. The project aims to reframe the story, highlighting his impact on hip-hop, his charity work, and his role as a parent. But the public reaction has been cold because legacies don't survive on messaging alone. They're shaped by actions, reactions, and who's still standing when the noise fades. Right now, Sean Combs is sitting in federal prison, while the world keeps moving without him. But it doesn't really move on because the tapes are still out there. The ones that were never shown in full, the ones former employees may still have. The same recordings that could explain why his daughters ran, why the jury hesitated, and why parts of that mansion were never fully searched. And if 50 Cent gets his way, those tapes won't stay hidden. The real question isn't if they surface, it's what happens when they do. Because this trial proved one thing clearly. The legal system has limits. Public judgment plays by a different set of rules. One location keeps resurfacing in quiet conversations. A warehouse in Los Angeles tied to allegations in a civil lawsuit. It's not just another setting in the story. Sources familiar with the claims describe it as a space filled with racks of clothing from Combs' past, including items linked to the notorious B.I., treated less like storage and more like symbols. According to the lawsuit, the incident allegedly involved an item associated with Biggie and took place in September 2020. If true, that timing matters because it came long after these events were publicly framed as being over. That detail raises serious questions about whether the behavior actually stopped or simply went quieter. This isn't just about shock value. It's about intent. The allegation suggests power, control, and the idea of crossing lines simply to show they could be crossed. So here's the question nobody wants to ask out loud. If someone was willing to disrespect the legacy of the deceased, what does that suggest about how they treated the living? Because if this wasn't an isolated moment, it changes how the entire story has to be understood. The pattern doesn't stop at the warehouse. It stretches back decades to the early 1990s when Sean Combs was building Bad Boy Records and earning a reputation as a kingmaker. The first Real crack appeared in 1994 at Quad Recording Studios where Tupac Shakur was robbed and shot multiple times. Shakur later said in interviews that he believed Combs was involved, claiming he had proof but chose not to reveal it publicly. Fast forward to 2024, and those old suspicions resurface. Dwayne Keith Davis, the man charged in Shocker's killing, told police in a leaked interview that Combs allegedly offered him $1 million to handle the situation. With a Netflix documentary placing those claims into the public spotlight, the question shifts from whether Combs was involved to whether this was part of a larger system. Because when you examine how he allegedly operated, the pattern looks familiar. Career access as leverage, loyalty rewarded, silence maintained through fear or financial pressure. Former employees have described environments where parties weren't casual gatherings, but tightly controlled events with unspoken rules set by one person. These weren't just private gatherings. They were structured situations. One person decided who stayed, who left, and who benefited. That structure mirrors how his empire functioned overall. The racketeering charges failed because the jury didn't believe employees knowingly participated. But in Combs' world, explicit instructions weren't necessary. People understood expectations by observing consequences. Makeup artists, security assistants, those accused of helping didn't need full explanations. They learned quickly that asking questions wasn't encouraged. And that system didn't stop at business. It extended into family life. His sons now rush to produce a documentary meant to reshape the narrative, while his daughters limit comments online to shield themselves from backlash. This isn't just a family under pressure. It's a structure built on control, now cracking as that control slips away in public view. And then there's the industry response, or more accurately, the lack of one. Where are the statements from the artist Sean Combs helped launch, the collaborators who profited from his rise, or the executives who looked the other way for years? The silence isn't accidental. In hip-hop, loyalty isn't just about respect, and it's about survival. Right now, survival means acting like this isn't happening. But the internet doesn't forget. Recordings don't magically vanish. And the people who were hurt aren't staying quiet anymore. Cassie Venter's lawsuit was settled in less than 24 hours. Yet she still took the stand. The male companions who spoke about the alleged freak-offs didn't just tell stories. They gave specifics. And the hotel staff who say they were paid to make surveillance footage disappear may end up being the most damaging voices of all. They weren't insiders chasing power. They were everyday workers who saw too much and are now realizing silence isn't required. That's where the real pressure starts. This reckoning isn't coming from courtrooms anymore. It's coming from the story being rewritten in real time by people who were actually there. The way his daughters reacted in court wasn't just shock. It looked like recognition. The jury clearing him on the most serious charges didn't feel like closure. It felt like proof that the system still struggles to confront power. And now former employees are stepping forward. Not just with lawsuits, but with first-hand accounts. For years, one man controlled the narrative. Now it's being shaped by the people who were in the room when the cameras were off. The party never planned for. Even the mansion in Home Hills has become a symbol. A massive estate with a basement that was never fully searched. A studio where no one knows what was recorded, and a history so toxic the property has been pulled from the market more than once. No one wants to buy a house where the walls might still be holding secrets, and secrets don't stay buried forever. Federal agents seized what they could clearly document. Substances, weapon components, and large amounts of intimate products. But the basement remains the unanswered question. The one former staffers keep whispering about. The one with soundproof rooms that was never fully examined. And if anything was overlooked the first time, it's safe to assume someone has a reason to keep it that way. But here's the flaw in that plan. We live in an era where nothing stays hidden forever. Not leaked footage, not quiet witnesses. Not the truth about what allegedly happened in that warehouse. In a world of screenshots and insiders with grudges, time doesn't erase secrets, it exposes them. What makes this story so unsettling isn't any single allegation. It's how the pieces lock together. The 1994 shooting at Quad Recording Studios. The long gunning claims tied to Tupac Shakur. The warehouse incident described in lawsuits and the visible reaction of Sean Call's daughters in court all point in the same direction. These gatherings weren't framed as private moments. They were described as power plays, situations where influence mattered more than consent, and silence had a price. That's why the attempt to reshape the narrative